make it available for everybody afterwards. So thanks for joining this workshop, which is Tanaaqoosh, tools to rethink discussion. And we'll talk about how to rethink not only roundtables, but classrooms and conversations in general, by rethinking how we think about discussion with the concept, the Arabic concept of Tanaaqoosh, which Karim is going to talk to us about. And Karim here, Karim Gossinger, who is going to lead this workshop, is the founder of the Cairo Institute of Liberal Arts and Sciences, which is a center in downtown Cairo, which embeds in the city liberal arts education outside of academia and in a daily basis. So thanks a lot, Karim, for being with us and for joining us for this conversation. And what Karim hopes, if you're joining now or if you're just watching this video afterwards, is that you got some tea. You want to say something about tea?
Oh, I'm going to say a lot about tea. Great. You just passed the mic to me, no? Was that the sign?
I guess. Oh yeah, and hi, I'm Emiko Stock. I'm an assistant professor at AUC, the American University in Cairo, in anthropology, and I'm one of the co-organizer of a virtual Otherwise. I think we're good. Alexandrine, do you want to say a word and maybe introduce yourself since you're on the other?
Hey, hi everyone. Are there other participants hidden somewhere, or it's just us?
Or? They might be hiding, but right now they're not around.
Okay. I just don't want to say hi everybody.
I think Rosalia
and very nice to be here. I'm Alexandrine Boudreau-Fournier, and I teach anthropology at the University of Victoria on the west coast of Canada on Vancouver Island.
Ooh, you're on an island. I'm on an island too.
Yes.
Say more about your island.
It's a big island, but there's no bridge around it. So you need the plane or ferry to actually get out of it.
Wow.
Yes.
How long does it take to get to the mainland by ferry?
It takes an hour and a half. But it's a beautiful ferry ride. You can see some whales and seals and eagles. It's beautiful.
I feel invited. I mean, it's in the other end of the world.
I'm not sure I will ever get.
And we also have, I think, Rosalia. I don't know, Rosalia, are you able to talk? I think I enabled you. This function is weird. Like I enabled you to talk. Okay, so I think Rosalia can hear us, but may not be able to, talk. But thanks for joining us also. And yes, I think we can get started now, and we'll see who is joining us afterwards.
That sounds wonderful. Perhaps Rosalia, if you can drop a message. Can people write messages, or do you have to enable that too? Just so that if you feel like communicating anything, slow down, Karim, repeat what you just said, or here's a question for you or something, that would be helpful for our purpose of discussions.
Yeah, I think that everybody can write in the chat if they want.
Can we just test that option? Like just drop a word in the chat, please.
I think there might be a connection problem though. So, because I think we just lost her.
Okay, great. But still, I mean, Alexandrine, if you want to comment on anything that you hear, like cheer me up, it's like, I love that, or just, I didn't get that, please feel free. And this way we can incorporate it into the flow of my storytelling. Okay, cool. I didn't get what you teach, what you will be teaching in 50 minutes. That could be helpful also for me, for my storytelling.
It's actually a colloquium. So every Monday we have in my department a colloquium. So we have a guest coming and they're sharing their research experiences in the field. And today is a PhD student who's sharing his experience with conducting research with a religious group in a rural community in Canada. And I am in charge of you know, welcoming and now like introducing the speaker and then moderating the questions.
Oh, that's great.
That's what we're here to talk about, like how to moderate questions in
Exactly.
more wisely, let's say. And so your field is anthropology also?
Yes, I teach anthropology. Yeah.
Okay.
So
I know that Emiko focuses on, I mean, visual anthropology and the intersection with the arts, and a little bit, but correct me if I'm wrong, Emiko, but what kind of anthropology are you interested in? It will help me also.
So that's also my field, visual anthropology, art, sound.
Okay. Oh, great. Did you want to add something, Emiko?
No, I'm just mindful of time, and also since this is recorded, and so that it can be, people are going to watch this.
I mean,
yeah. So I was thinking,
yeah.
maybe...
I mean, this is for me. It's necessary background just to kind of be able to respond and to address you and to accommodate you. So I hope this is not stretching too much.
No, absolutely not. But I was thinking maybe we could start with the notion of Tanaaqoosh, and then I don't know, maybe move from there, or like explore from there.
Yeah, great. So just a minor adjustment or correction to your introduction, Emiko. So I'm the founder of a small college in Fatimid Cairo, historic Cairo, not downtown Cairo, and that's important for Tanaaqoosh. I'm not sure if you've been to Cairo before, Alexandrine. People say that it was founded in the 970s, so about 1,000 years ago, by the so-called Fatimid dynasty, which was a ruling family from Tunisia that set up their, center of governance, their seat of government here in Cairo. And they've left behind a beautiful built environment of mosques and madrasas and housing. And so we're sitting, we're embedded in that. And the Fatimids are also remembered and renowned for their style of calligraphy, which they have developed. And that's very much related to the notion of Tanaaqoosh, which comes from the Arabic word naqasha. So like all Arabic words are rooted in 3 letters. The letters here are Nun, Qaf, and Sheen, naqasha. And naqasha could mean different things, but one of the things it means is to what a sculptor does when sculpting a rock or any material, but it could also mean chiseling a rock and sort of creating a shape out of it. It could also mean in modern use, the way we use it in our everyday, painting the walls and doing the interior design of a house that you're moving into. For you call up the Tanaaqoosh to come and do the paintings and like set up the space. And the meaning that we're going to explore today is naqasha, in that, which also means to discuss or to debate or to dialogue. So that connection is quite interesting because it reminds us that engaging in dialogue is engaging in this, mutual act of beautifying a stone, of chiseling a stone, of shaping it. And my sense has been and which is what I've trying to communicate, trying to express through writing and storytelling, is that the way we've understood debate and a culture of debate has been very cerebral and very much focused on reasoning, rational argument, sound argument, and less so on the poetics, perhaps the beauty in exchanging words, in exploring a topic. So that just by way of introducing the words, what I would say. So, a variant of Tanaaqoosh is Naqash, and Naqash also means discussion. And it's what has served, I should perhaps say a word or two about CELAS, which is the acronym for Cairo Institute of Liberal Arts and Sciences, which is the college I set up. It's an autonomous college, so it's not state sanctioned, it's not government approved or, you know, licensed, nor is it and funded by private money or basically, yeah. So it's neither public nor private. It's an autonomous in the sense that it's self-funded and it's self-sufficient in that it welcomes students from all walks of life and is sensitive to their financial ability to contribute to sustaining the college. The college was set up in 2012, 2013 in the aftermath of the so-called Arab Spring, or the January 25th revolution, as us revolutionaries refer to it. And so it's very much in the revolutionary spirit. And one of the things that informed the way that this college offers courses and invites students to engage in these courses is through discussion-based learning, or in Arabic, تعلم بناء على النقاش. Right? Naqash, again, is discussion or chiseling or beautifying the stone. So learning through beautification of words and exchange of ideas and so on. One of the things that is important to bear in mind is that the Cairene context, so Cairo is, okay. Oh, dialogical non-tangential methods. Forest curriculum. Okay, I'm going to tell you about our urban jungle here, but I would love if you can write more in a moment to tell us about your jungle. Okay, quickly, the urban jungle of Cairo. Cairo is, some people would say, a monster. You know, can eat you alive. And we all feel that way. It, you know, speaking about soundscapes, so it's you know, there's a honking sound, you know, like honking cars all day, all night. And they accentuate kind of, you know, the soundscape that is Cairo. It's also a very crowded and very densely built. I'm an urbanist by training, so I'm going to give you some details about the urban fabric of Cairo. Some people argue it's the second most dense city in terms of, like, you know, built environment. Paris, by the way, Emiko, is first, or, you know, said to be even denser. And within that density, at this point, there's probably between 25 and 30 million people in Greater Cairo, which extends across 3 provinces, 3 jurisdictions. And so it makes it a mess to kind of plan, you know, transport across these jurisdictions, housing across these jurisdictions. So part of the mess is that it's, you know, there's a legal dissonance between, and a political dissonance and a financial dissonance. So there's a lot of, like, mismatch, which makes it what it is. However, something that gives it coherence and consistency is that within Greater Cairo, you have so-called street cafes, or Ahawi Baladi, implanted within them. And these are open-air cafes that are constantly transforming. So the plastic chairs that are usually stacked up by the end of the day. I mean, the end of the day is the beginning of, is just before the sun rises again, right? So the end of the day extends into like 3, 4, 5 a.m. just before the sun rises. Then people perhaps go home, rest a little bit. And then the early beginning of the day is definitely afternoon, right? So it's a, you know, a different conception of day and night also, right? Cairo is very much a nocturnal society. And so happens, you know, life plays out at night. And it plays out in these street cafes, which are, as I just mentioned, plastic chairs topped up. So you remove one of these plastic chairs, you position yourself around smaller tables that can be moved around easily, just enough for a teapot or cups, or, you know, tea or coffee, Turkish coffee typically. And people come together, and especially during the revolution, during the heyday of the 2011, we would just like immerse ourselves deeply into conversation around these moving objects. And people would just share their their imaginings, their visions for a post-revolutionary Egypt. This is the third revolution in Egypt's modern history. There was one in 1919, 1952, and then 2011. And this is important because it's a recurrent revolutionary spirit in a way that kind of it falls dormant and then it awakens again. And you see similar things play out after 1919, after 1952, where people are drawn around these street cafes. There's a beautifully performative element. It almost like people stepping up on a theater stage, and then passers-by being invited along to sort of do a guest role and so on. All of this to say that these conversations were, to my eyes, divinely guided somehow. You know, they just, you know, stirred up brilliant ideas, incredibly, you know, deep visions as to how to organize this mess, how to support each other, how to be in solidarity, how to keep on resisting, you know, how to sort of preserve this revolutionary spirit onwards as we move. And I felt that when it came, you know, when it 4 a.m., 5 a.m., the sun was about to rise, people were getting a little sleepier, and it was time to go home, that something just kind of faded away and it needed to be carried on and built on or continued. There were conversations to be continued. And that's how discussion-based learning came about, in that I felt that these conversations that were happening at the street cafes were very much pre-conversations. They were very much like what people refer to as a brainstorming, even though I think that's a terrible term. It's just more of an attunement to the winds, you know, the revolutionary winds. And sometimes there are breezes, sometimes they're a little bit stormy. So just recognizing that there's different kinds of like souffle. Oh, by the way, there's a beautiful poem by Léopold Senghor called Le Souffle des Ancêtres, for those of you who read French, one of the most beautiful poems I've ever read. Oh, thank you for your words. That's so encouraging. So nice to meet you. I hope you can.
Nice meeting you, and I will follow up. I will follow up with the next steps.
I should mention that I'm also on an island, the island of Zamalek.
I will look for it.
It's pretty easy, lots of bridges to access, so you should come and check it out.
Okay.
Have a lovely.
Thank you so much. Nice meeting you, Alexandro.
Bye-bye.
Okay, great. So
you were saying what you learned from the street cafes?
So the street cafes were incredibly generative. They're incredibly intuitive, and people were speaking from the heart. Obviously, there was, you know, coffee involved and tea involved, so a lot of was very caffeinated, and so, you know, like fireworks. And I felt that these colors across, you know, needed to be captured somehow. And that's about how discussion-based learning started emerging. That I felt we needed to continue these conversations. And I started making that distinction between a pre-discussion, which is more intuitive, which kind of allowed for prior knowledge, things people have read, you know, personal experience to be voiced. And I felt what I could do as a believer in the spirit of the liberal arts is to remind people that these kinds of questions and ideas have been stirred up and generated before by others, and have been written down, have been recorded otherwise, and that we needed to sort of be in conversation with voices, thoughts, and ideas elsewhere at different times and different points in time. And so what I suggested with Silas was, you know, let us curate, you know, like a toolbox or a resource box, and engage with readings, with podcasts, with films for a week, and then come back and continue the pre-discussion with a post-discussion that now is informed, theoretically informed, or somehow more substantive, right? Let's invite interlocutors into the conversation. So in a nutshell, that's how DBL plays out, you know, operationally speaking.
Wait, what is DBL?
Oh, discussion-based learning.
Oh, sorry.
Right. But I guess the important thing for our purposes, you know, for people teaching in academia where you're expected to deliver a syllabus. So for instance, at Silas, We don't do syllabi, we do tentative flows, because we can't know for sure how the winds, how far they will carry us, how strong they will be blowing us, right? We might have a pre-discussion that is deeply inspired and inspiring, and we might have a pre-discussion that is kind of, people are sleepy and exhausted and not much will surface. So what we're trying to do is like just honor also the fatigue and the exhaustion that we experience as Kairenes, because it's, you know, the honking cars, the polluted air, and the traffic.
3 hours commutes.
Say again?
The 3-hour commute.
The commutes, yo. And but we can, I mean, so part of the sort of the intellectual training or the training in the liberal arts is to develop an appreciation for questions, right? And I guess, you know, AUC is a liberal arts college. I'm sure, what is it, University of Victoria? Yeah. They probably, you know, also care about the humanities and the liberal arts in that same way, that they want to honor questions and then do justice to these questions, revise them, revisit them, and so on. I mean, pretty much what a scholarly attitude kind of towards life is all about. And so what we do with the pre-discussions in kind of just, you know, wondering and thinking out loud. So one important thing, and I guess this is also in preparation for the virtual otherwise hybrid conference, is this notion of prompts. So these prompts is what start the exploration. What you know, I mean, they prompt the pre-discussion. And these prompts could be anything from like an excerpt from a text to a poem, to an artifact, to a scene from a movie, to a sound or a musical composition. So it could be textual, it could be audio visual, just visual, you know, artifactual, and so on. And see what it prompts in us, you know, like really honor the responses of people. And you will notice that, I mean, you will notice certain dynamics, and I think these are important to appreciate. You'll notice that, you know, extroverts will respond immediately. Men are often sort of, in this context especially, you know, easy to voice or eager to voice right away. And and I think as a teaching fellow and other teaching fellows with me at Silas, here the moderation comes in, which is sit with this prompt, take a breath. Go back to your cup of tea, slow down and see what comes up, and let it rest, right? Because it's not necessarily the fastest answer which will get us to the, you know, the most compelling questions. And so it's really an invitation to slow down at the end of the day, and to tap into, as I was saying earlier, prior knowledge, and to kind of cultivate intuition. And that's, I think, is incredibly important, right? Yeah. And to be able to do that in the presence of others, right? Because there's always something, okay, I'm being eyed. Oh, should I speak? Should I keep it to myself? And the introverts obviously will be sort of like a little bit more mindful of their voice and the space that they're taking up in a seminar room or a classroom anyways. So with these prompts, you know, we're inviting responses. We're inviting also like feelings of confusion and just, yeah, this is repulsive to me. You know, these prompts could be not just thought-provoking, but they could also be like nausea-inducing. You know, sometimes I go a little graphic on people. It's like, whoa, especially in this context, you know, if you show a Lars von Trier like scene from a film, like, yo, you know, so there's you can moderate that as well, which is also why I was kind of like, you know, asking a little bit, Alexandrine, what's your field, you know, where are you positioned, kind of to attune into that, also readiness to engage with, you know, and be able to select prompts that could provoke a little less or a little more, and depending also where we are in the course. So I begin with kind of like, you know, easily chewable prompts. Okay, that's easy to digest. And then, you know, the prompts become a little, whoa, what's that aftertaste? But anyway, so these prompts
kind of like
usually,
when you break the fast, you don't go right into the full meal, you have a little snack first.
The date.
Exactly.
Just like Sunnah, the Prophet Muhammad, he would just like, here's a date, everyone, let's start with the date.
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you. Actually.
No, not at all. These interruptions are just moments of like confused, like, where was I? What was I anywhere?
We're here, right here.
You know, we're Mangifi Rek. So Wolof, I'm here and only here. So yeah, so the point of departure are these prompts, and there's a lot of curation around these prompts, obviously depending on the topic you want to explore. Right. What I try to think about is like, what are the assumptions that, you know, are commonly held around this topic, and then I try to select a prompt which challenges these assumptions. Because it invites, and this kind of gets us to the end of the pre-discussion. So that the point of departure of the pre-discussion are these prompts. And they arrive, or they lead to the raising of questions, formulating and articulating questions that we agree upon collectively. And I think this is incredibly important for our intention to engage in collective research, which I think many of my academic friends are telling me that this is kind of, you know, the direction things are moving in. Less solitary individual research. I team up with someone, form a group, form a research collective. Arguably the most challenging bit is to agree on the questions we want to raise collectively. And so moving from the prompts, and again, the reason why I don't necessarily like this idea of a mind map is that there's a lot, mapping or cartography as a discipline, as a practice, as a tool is, like anything, has a history. Its modern colonial history is a pretty charged one. Yeah. And so mapping is, serves a purpose of kind of like sketching and surveying, but I think there's something underground, something deeper happening here. And so what I invite is the practice of remembrance. Tap into your prior knowledge. What memories come up? What memories surface from underneath and kind of find their way up? And so mapping to me is a little bit of a superficial exercise. However, I think what mind mapping gets right, and collective mind mapping, is the visualization bit. And I think this is interesting to anyone interested in the visual anthropology bit. Yes. Which is, as we're remembering, how do we honor these memories? One way to do so is to document them visually. Write them on a board, write them on the walls, on sticky notes, and turn this classroom into something more akin to a cabinet of curiosities. Just allow all these curiosities to surface. And it doesn't only have to be sort of, vertically put up on the walls. You could put some on the table, some on the floor, some on the walls. If there's a ladder, please, by all means, climb up and put them on the ceilings. And I think this curation of memories is incredibly important for us, to prepare for the kinds of questions that we really want to engage with at a deeper level. So what we do then for, let's say, 20 minutes to 20 to 30 minutes is just to generate all of this and to let it land, to let it fall in place before we then try and sort of draw these connections and like hash out these constellations. So what constellations do you see? And you might see something on one wall and connecting to something on the ceiling, connecting to something on the ground. And it's this very shape that intrigues me as an educator. And I want people to see that, because it's part of the birthing, of questions, the honorable kind, the kind that we want to sit with, spend time with, keep in our pockets as we go through our everyday lives for a week, and do justice to throughout that week, and return to together, and then start kind of like exchanging tentative answers, or, exchange our findings around, which is then the post-discussion bit. So just to kind of wrap up the pre-discussion bit, the prompts and the careful selection of prompts, tuning into the readiness of people, seeing what kind of prompt, visual, textual, audio, artifactual. So there's a lot there in terms of curating and to be done. And then the moderating bit towards the questions that we can collectively articulate and agree on. And I will just leave you kind of with two things that I introduce the students to in the core curriculum. you know, earlier I was talking about, I try to choose prompts that provoke kind of a, wait a second, I assume that it is this and that, right? And these assumptions, you know, let's say, the assumption is that Emiko is a great anthropologist. And then somehow this
great
prompt,
assumption.
yeah, right, it's a great assumption. But what if you were to flip it on its head and kind of like probe it? And then, you know, Emiko is a great anthropologist. All you have to do is change the order of the words. And he's like, is Emiko a great anthropologist? You're not adding anything. You know, this is kind of like the very basic technique of how do we raise a question. And it's kind of a trivial question. Like, that's annoying. You know, you're asking me to say yes or no. Well, you know, do say yes and tell me why, and do say no and tell me why, right? What in the French tradition, especially at Sciences Po, where I was trained, is like les deux parties. You know, like première partie, deuxième partie, and then
right,
voilà,
yeah,
we round it up. And it's a way of kind of like, okay, here's a left hand, here's a right hand. Let me see, you know, arguments, counter arguments. So very dialectical, pretty basic. The other kinds of questions is the one that invites kind of looking around the room and seeing what we generated, what surfaced, and like drawing out these constellations and recognizing these shapes, which we then engage in Tanaaqoosh, that we start chiseling afterwards, right? So down here under the table, there's a post-it that says Emiko. On the wall over here, it says anthropology. And on the other wall, it says truthfulness. So, is Emiko a truthful anthropologist? Okay, this also happens to be a yes or no question. It's like, but how does Emiko's practice of anthropology or, you know, training in anthropology relate to or interplay with truthfulness? So I call the first technique inversion technique, just inverting something, flipping it on its head. And the second technique I call the interplay technique. Who can we invite to play with each other? And so these are just, you know, what you read, what you learn when you're trained in philosophy is like, how do you ask good questions? You know, any like the spirit of the liberal arts is such that you learn to appreciate questions and recognize this is a good question, this is a less good question, this is a great question, this is an even greater question. And that's the tricky bit. You know, we can have good question, bad question.
But I like the idea that you, I like the idea that you're playing it like, you know, like it's a puzzle, right? It makes me think of, you know, like, I don't know, like I noticed that in the US, it's probably very common in other countries, but like, you know, those little things, those little magnets that you put on the fridge, and they're like pieces of a poem. So there is a potential like cheesy poem out there, and you have like 10 words, and you can move the words around, you know, every morning, and you get a different poem, right? So you have like 10 different words, and you play with those 10 different words. And so, and that's kind of what you described with the post-its, right? Like, okay, we have ideas, we generate those ideas on the floor, on the ceiling, like everywhere. We look around, we take a step back. And then when we bring them together in different ways, because people will have different ways of bringing it together, but when we sort of like exchange those ideas, we reconstruct something completely different that might be very beautiful, because, you know, we wouldn't have thought about it if right from the beginning we would sit down on paper and be like, okay, what is my question, basically?
Lovely. Two observations, and I'm just going to sort of voice back what I heard. First of all, cheesiness, not to be underestimated. Cheesiness is a great principle. You know, like cheesy poems. Yes, great point of departure, great place to start. You know, and obviously nothing wrong with cheese. As a French woman, I'm not sure how you relate to cheese, but anyways, I'm assuming, you know, and please invert the assumption if you don't agree. Anyways, so yes, cheese. The other thing that you're saying is, yes, you know, as you're looking on your paper and you're like, you know, tearing, in Arabic, you say, shed the flower. You pull your hair. I was like, where am I going to go with this? A great place to go is into your feet, which is to say, get up from your chair. Enough with the armchair approach. Stand up, walk around, kind of like take a step back, take a step forward, take a step to the side, turn around, see what it says behind you, see what it says underneath you. And that's why allowing for these ideas and, you know, associations and, you know, experiences, etc., to surface is you don't know where they're going to land. And allowing yourself for that to sort of, they're just going to end up, okay, I'm somehow feeling drawn to this wall, I'm going to stick it over here. And it's just not overthinking that first step. Just let things land And then later in a second stage, take a step back and notice the constellations. And I really like how you put that with the puzzle, the mosaic, the fragments, right? I'm very Benjaminian in my training. And so I really appreciate just fragments, aphorisms, like small bits and pieces, as you were saying with this little poem exercise. But the other thing to notice is in sort of standing up and allowing your feet to take steps and sort of this choreography to play out is also an embodied practice, right? So recognizing that academia has been a very much a disembodied space. So how do we re-embody, or how do we return to the body? How do we invite the body back into, the classroom for now? Obviously, if we're able to take students out of the classroom, in this case with the virtual, otherwise, we're going to be glued somehow. But there's other ways, obviously, to engage the body. And that's perhaps something that we can move to in this second part of the conversation. But yeah, thank you for reminding us of the embodied practice that this entails. So, recap, prompt, formulating questions, agreeing on questions as a collective, and honoring that these are the questions we're going to do justice to. I think this is for, I don't care much about the project of democracy, but for us to kind of live in community or to engage in collective research, I think we need to get better at that. We need to sort of develop the intellectual humility to recognize this is, let's sit with this. Let's agree upon this. And let's honor this. Let's do justice to this. In a way, it's respecting each other's sense of wonderment. I've been wondering about this. I'm wondering about this. Okay, so we recognize that we sense wonderment. Let's now move and activate our sense of justice and recognize that sense of wonderment and sense of justice are two sides of the same coin.
I like that.
The post-discussion now, after a week of engaging with material, and I think this is going to be crucial for the virtual, otherwise hybrid conference, is to allow for that in-between space. So recognize that there's something that happens prior and then something that requires or demands of us individual study. It's some in-depth kind of quality time with a text. And obviously a text and a cup of tea. And that's my second entry for this teacup, is the tea is that invitation to slow down. Slow down in our response to the prompt, but also slow down in our engagement with the assigned material, be it textual, be it a podcast, be it a visit to a museum. It's just like approach it slowly and allow the interlocutor, be it the author of the text, be it the person in the podcast, be it the voice you're engaging, to really kind of reach you and touch you. And I think for that, we need to, again, some sort of an embodied practice so that it just can kind of bounce off and kind of is immediately co-opted by our mind, mediated, try to make sense of, but rather sort of to experience it, to disarm ourselves, intellectually speaking, and just, okay, I'm opening myself up to this, I'm assuming a position of vulnerability in my engagement with this. Obviously, this requires that we dedicate time. You can't be rushed and vulnerable. You have to slow down to become more vulnerable. And so this is where the teaching fellow comes in, or the presenter, or the panelist, whatever you call them in your conference, because it is going to require that you respond and engage with the question that your fellow thinkers or practitioners or whatever come up with. And so in a way, you're kind of like there's this moment of helplessness, like, okay, I didn't expect these questions. Yes, do invite the unexpected in and kind of like take a moment back. You yourself need to slow down as the teacher, as the prof, as the instructor, and like recognize in that moment, whoa, these questions came out of nowhere. They came out of somewhere, but I didn't expect them. And that's okay. Let me see how I can serve them. What kind of food for thought I can serve people with that kind of, appetite.
Mm-hmm.
And it's recognizing that people come with an appetite, with, inquiries and, leanings and sort of, curiosities that are perhaps not aligned with yours as the ones who put down the syllabus, which is also why I don't think the syllabus is necessarily always helpful. Obviously, in an introductory course where you kind of like, all right, let's try this field or something, it makes more sense. But in the context of a conference, the whole point is that we feel, at loss, so that we can find out together. I mean, how else are you going to find out something new or generate new ideas, or, the very idea, conference.
But what I particularly like here is that, especially in the context of a hybrid conference, so basically really embracing the fact that it's all virtual or mainly virtual, but what you're suggesting is that the moment of the intellectual creative engagement might not necessarily be the conference. It might be before the conference, during the conference, and after the conference. Well, I feel like the conferences, most of the time, the way we see conferences is that there is this peak, right? Like you prepare your paper or your panel with your co-panelists, with your friends and colleagues. That's one moment, but it's kind of like in a rush, exactly what you were speaking against. Like there's a deadline and everything, and we all rush to finish the paper, and then we get on a plane or we go somewhere, we deliver the paper or we deliver it online. We try to manage the time zone difference. We teach from a kitchen we read from the kitchen so that we don't wake up partners or family members, etc. And then it kind of ends. Like we always have like this kind of like, wishful list, right, of people we want to, stay in touch with. We want to send a nice email, or, we really like this talk or this paper, but it hardly ever goes any further, right? Like it generally stops at the moment of the conference. And what I like is that you're suggesting a mode of engaging in a conference like the virtual otherwise completely differently, where participants might create a space in the virtual of their complete invention, like they can, think about it ahead of time, where they invite, other participants that we usually refer to as attendees to actually become participants themselves. And then, the conference and then the after conference. And I really like that. And how do you see that unfolding in like virtual conferences, for example?
I really appreciate that reflection. Especially the notion of like pre-conference and after conference. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And I guess, one way this could play out is that, as you're saying, first of all, I don't like panels. I've enjoyed keynote speeches. There have been some very charming keynote speakers that I've come across. But the panel bit, why are people sitting in a row like, chicken that are being bred? In a way, it feels like there's no need to be. I also don't think that we necessarily need to be sitting in a circle, which seems to be the hype these days, right? Anyway, never mind these kind of two configurations or geometrical shapes. I really like the pre-conference idea in the sense that what you could ask presenters is to get us started with what I've referred to as a prompt or a teaser, kind of like a sneak preview into what to expect. Isn't that the coolest thing? You're like, when you watch like a trailer for a movie, it's like, yo, that's a movie I want to see. And I think we should honor that. People should like, especially in these like busy times where there's so much cool shit happening, as like, do I want this? And, the heyday of like FOMO and like, I don't want to be missing out on other stuff, but I want to be, really attending this, as you're saying, like participating in this. So one thing that you could perhaps ask presenters to do is think of a prompt. This prompt could be textual, it could be a sound piece, it could be a visual, it could be audiovisual. It could be something that people receive by mail, not email, by mail, and something to touch and kind of feel and engage with. Or it could be an invitation to go out into the park and like walk around for like 15 minutes with your eyes closed, and then to reflect on that, right? And kind of like harvesting these responses and then cooking up a meal with that. Why would you ask a presenter to just kind of come up with something on their own when there is so many participants who are willing to chip in and to share their impressions of that teaser, of that prompt, based on which based on this harvest, the presenter can then choose some of their own writing, some other writing, some filmic material, whatever, you know, it is they feel like sharing with this group, which has engaged and responded with the prompt and are clearly eager to continue that exploration. Here's some more. Engage with this and let us, you know, share this. So the first one is like an appetizer. It's like an entrée, right? If you want to come back for the plat principal, for the main course, engage with these, you know, ingredients, and let's come together and follow up on this food with some exchanging of food for thought around this, right? And this could be then more of a DBL or discussion-based learning, even if it's online and in a chat room or whatever. And then, right, so obviously the cool thing would be to generate these questions based on these prompts, to already invite people to a pre-discussion based on in response to these prompts, and to generate these questions, and then to provide material that engages with these questions, and then kind of see how people would respond to these questions together. Not just have the expert or the academic or the specialist answer these questions, but let's answer these questions together in the so-called post discussion.
Yeah.
And then kind of see about the afterlives of these preliminary answers, of this first exchange of findings. You know, it's really, to me, I mean, remembering my university days, it's usually after we walk out of the classroom or out of the lecture hall that the really juicy stuff comes up, right? It's what happens after the post discussion. Like, oh, yo, I'm remembering what this one person said, and it's relating to what I'm experiencing right now. Keep track of that, right? And that would be the after conference part, is how does what we discussed in the post discussion in sharing our findings relate to your everyday lives as you carry them on? And in a way, you're kind of like stretching and opening up the conference format by inviting the pre and the post into it. And you're tiptoeing about that around what is usually considered to be the conference bit.
Yeah.
So that would be perhaps one way. So perhaps one note about the virtual thing, the fact that it's going to be happening online.
Yeah.
I think the online thing allows for more creativity actually when it comes to the prompts. Because, you know, there's so much stuff online, like, you know, recordings and, you know, and I think what I've tried to do in offering classes online is to invite people to really sit back and listen. Put your headphones in and feel this musical composition, which is not a practice that many people keep anymore, unfortunately. Right. You know, just 1 hour of listening to music every day. There is always either overstimulation, often through like social media, which is kind of like all over the place and algorithmic can really channel towards your, you know, I have no idea. It's like an echo chamber, as they say these days. But there's very little sort of like carefully selected, hear this, and like sit back for like 10 minutes and let it kind of shower you. Or watch this scene from a movie, or watch this short film. So I think it just opens up lots of possibilities for audio and audiovisual engagement in terms of the prompt. Obviously, in terms of the assigned material as well. Go ahead.
No, I was really, you know, captivated by what you were saying about slowing down with sound and with audio, for example. So sitting down with your headphones and actually listening to what you're listening to, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm teaching this is the very first time that this semester I'm teaching a sonic ethnography class. So basically listening to the world, and especially in Cairo. And it's fast, like the things that the students bring back, and you know, how this class is not only for them, but also for me to slow down and listen to the sounds of our commute, like how, you know, the kind of things that we take for granted, right? Like, you know, the sound of a prayer, for example, every evening, like, you know, how we look at it like, how we listen to how we hear it, but it's part of a landscape. And now how, if you slow down, you hear different waves, different vibrations, and you can recognize like one of them from another, from a neighborhood, it sounds differently if you're in one neighborhood or in another, etc., the sound of the streets. And so that really asks you to slow down and take one thing at a time, take one sound at a time. And so it's amazing how just, sort of like suddenly like taking the time to think about those questions forces you to take the time to slow down and taking more into consideration, or take maybe not more, but take better consideration.
Poetry, music to my ears, lovely.
Oh.
I mean, you distilled it so beautifully. It's about slowing down. And that's, again, my third appearance for this cup of tea. It seems like this, wow, of screen time, and yeah, but there's also tea time. And I think the two can like complement each other very nicely. So if you've had enough kind of like visual stimulation, just look into your cup of tea, close your eyes. And it's an invitation.
Wait, do I look at the cup of tea or do I close my eyes?
Right? For you to say, for you to practice, really.
Okay.
But one thing that you're doing nicely already is to keep the handle like on the opposite side. This way you're using both hands. And in so doing, you're also kind of checking in with your body. It's like, yo, my shoulders have been up here all this time as I'm typing away on my keyboard.
True.
Oh, teacup time, lower the shoulders. Connect to the heart. Slow down because it's hot. And if I'm going to rush as I've been, I'm going to like spill it all over me. Say, I don't want that. So it is kind of like a very gentle reminder, as they say, of slowing down. And the other thing you were saying about in relation to the sonic ethnography class, I love, right? This idea of just sitting back and appreciating a music composition or a sonic experience. But perhaps also, how can we, extend invitations? And I'm referring to the prompts. How can we prompt or extend invitations that would say, here's a sound recording, take it on your phone to the park or along the river, along the Nile, or wherever you are, and listen to it as you're walking through, along the Nile or through the park. How does this soundscape relate to, the landscape that you're walking through? I mean, that's a beautiful question, and it generates lovely connections. And the other thing, another beautiful practice that you mentioned in terms of slowing down also is to go out into the streets and record. People are very excited about, oh, you want me to record? You want me to kind of document this? I mean, pretty much ethnographic sonic ethnography, as you're saying, and then exchange these sound pieces with each other. Whoa, what an intimate learning experience, really.
I really like that. Yeah. I like the idea of exchanging sound pieces, like one would exchange vocals with a friend.
Oh yeah. It's a way. Oh, and let's perhaps end on what you asked me to talk about, reciprocity. What a beautiful practice of reciprocity. Yeah. Here's what I was tuned in today. What were you tuned in today? So, woo! I mean, it's a non-monetary exchange, right? It's a way of celebrating gift culture. Here's a gift, a sound piece as a gift. Here's an offering. Here's something my eardrums experienced in exchange for what your eardrums experience. It's almost like the eardrums are kissing in that moment. Oh. Okay, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but then again, we evoke poetry, so I'm happy to exaggerate, for the sake of better consideration, deeper learning, more heartfelt learning, more embodied learning, more sonic learning, you name it. Obviously, all of this also implies a lot of unlearning, because we're used to doing things, very cerebrally, very just in a disembodied way, the consumerist, especially in today's academia. There's a lot of still pedagogy of consumption. It's like, yo, you consume this, in return you get some credentials, here's your credit points, here's your degree, go out there and land a job on the labor market. The logic is very much, it's very transactional, it's very consumerist still. Obviously there is maverick anthropologists and profs that are cool as fuck, like yourself, excuse my language. But anyways, just to get the point across. Again?
Wishful thinking.
No, I mean, you can carve out these spaces. You can hack the system, as some of my comrades have been trying to do. And I see that they're running out of juice, and they're feeling drained at the end of the academic year with the grading coming up. Like, I have to grade 100 papers. I've been there. I told you when I was teaching at AUC 6 years ago, it was like the grading. Oh my God, the grading is degrading. It is. It's like, what do you want? It's like, okay, now put a target on everyone's head and write a letter. I'm like, no, it's an act of violence, and I don't. Yes, I'm complicit in many ways, but I'm not going to be co-opted into this. And that's where I refused, and I walked out. I had walked out before. I wanted to, I was unsure, so I came back, and then I walked out for good. And yeah, I don't believe in numerical grading. I don't believe in numerical assessment. A, B, C, D. These are not numbers, I know, but like in this kind of like very categorical grading. I believe, and this is perhaps also something to consider for the conference. How do we assess this? How do we assess whether this was a good conference or what room of improvement is there for the next virtual otherwise? I think narrative assessment is a very beautiful way. Write a love letter to the conference. And this might sound over the top, but why not?
Please, anybody watching this, write us love letters.
Again?
Please. No, I'm saying, please, anybody watching this, write us love letters to all of us.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No. And love letters in the sense is like, dear hybrid, what is it called? A virtual otherwise. Yes. I really appreciated this and that about you. And, allow me. Here's how I see that you could improve, or you could stretch, or you could do things differently next year. Yours truly, Emiko Stock. That's an assessment that will help us grow, would help us create room for improvement, but also to appreciate, okay, all right, I received the compliments. It's another practice that we really, especially as academics or scholars, we're not very good at kind of like, yo, this is amazing. It's like, oh, it wasn't really that good. No, it was good. Take a moment.
No, absolutely. Bravo. I think that this is a little bit sad that, we all go into academia because we've been completely in love with a series of books, a series of films, that have changed us. And we just want to do that for ever and ever after. This is why we want to be involved with, right? But then the moment we walk into academia, we lose this, the magic of academia because of all the structures over us, because of how crazy our days are, et cetera, but also of like a certain toxicity, maybe in the way we relate to each other instead of collegiality. And we lose like the genuine sending of emails like, you know what, I read that book and of yours and I just loved it and I have to tell you, and I'm just going to send this email, or I went to your talk last week and it was just beautiful and I just have to say it. We don't do that so much, right? And we should.
Exactly. I mean, these things happen, right? But they don't happen nearly often enough. Like, let's do more of that. That's pretty much what because as you're saying, that the academic institution in the modern sense, and especially in the late capitalist sense, with its neoliberal assault, has been burdening. It's been overwhelming. The politics have been sort of corrupting and so on. Like I'm not the one to sort of to voice that critique or to put forward that critique. But what I see is that within our research collectives, be it together with our students, together with our fellow faculty members, we can create what I was describing earlier. We can a more appreciative environment at the end of the day. Let's appreciate our lived experiences in response to this prompt. Let's tap into the prior knowledge and sort of like be patient with each other as we're remembering, because remembering can't be rushed. Some of the, the most profound and intimate memories are stored somewhere very carefully because they're fragile, they're precious. You're not just gonna be, all right, let me remember this and just like throw it out. That's perhaps in the US context. And I'm kind of, I'm anti-imperialist in that way. And I don't believe in the rushedness and, the business as usual approach of, anyways, you get the point. I mean, the slowing down will allow us to kind of heal also. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of wounds that have been inflicted and pain that has been inflicted by this. All right, you better publish 3, 5, or 5 papers a year or perish. So that's kind of a pretty awful and daunting binary to kind of sit with every day. And that's pretty much what I'm saying with the love letters. And you also said that it's happening, and I'm glad you're noticing it. And I encourage everyone
it should happen more.
It. More, yeah.
Always more.
The more, the merrier.
Yeah.
Is there anything else? Because you told me that you're gonna have to close the webinar or something.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we have like an hour or so of recording, and then if people want to send questions or comment on anything, they should feel free to reach out. The video will be available on the website of the Virtual Otherwise, and we have an email there that people can reach out to. We'll make sure also to leave your contact, Karim, so that people can reach out to you if they want directly. But I think this is a great conversation to get us started and to get our participants from the conference started on their contributions, so that they can think about quote unquote panels in a different way. So what would an hour panel look like if we were to think about it as like pre-discussion, discussion, and post-discussion? How would it be structured? So I think, you raised essential questions that are touching us both, I think, not only as teachers, scholars, but also as, hopefully practitioners who want like a better conversations to happen in the world in general. Right. So thank you so much, Karim. And I'm not sure if we have people still around, but thank you everyone who might still be out there. And hopefully, see you soon at the Virtual Otherwise in June. Karim will be there, and as many others, it will be beautiful. We'll see you in Cairo, we'll see you in many other places in the world, and we'll see you on the screen also. Bye, everyone. Karim, one last word?
Oh, thank you for hosting, Emiko. This was lovely. And
it's beautiful.
I really appreciate how you reflected on what I was sharing and harvested some of the sort of more useful insights for the purpose of this conference.
And more of that tomorrow afternoon.
Yes, 5 o'clock, yeah?
Yes, absolutely.
On the balcony for tea. Looking forward.
Exactly.
Okay. Yes, I wrote my email. Please send me an email. I enjoy connecting from time to time. I'm not a very virtual person, but I think the Virtual Otherwise is definitely a step in the right direction.
Hopefully.
Inshallah.
Have a lovely evening, everyone, and like Ramadan Kareem for everyone in this part of the world or in other parts of the world, but still celebrating. And have a beautiful day wherever you are. Bye.
Bye-bye.